All right, I got my saddle. I've been practicing with it. I'm comfortable with it. Now, what do I need to do from a safety standpoint to maintain all my gear?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is if you get the saddle wet, do not put the saddle away wet and just let it stay that way. You want to hang it out in the sun, let it completely dry. You know, you want to make sure your ropes are not put away wet and they get moldy and whatnot. So biggest thing is keep it dry. What I like to tell people is treat this thing like your favorite hunting jacket. Don't just toss it in the bed of the truck, let it get all wet and soggy and whatnot. But from there, you want to, don't leave it out in the sun. Sun is going to damage your webbing and lessen the strength of it. So don't put it away wet. Don't leave it in the sun. Treat it like your favorite hunting jacket. So from there, you want to inspect your bridge and your life-bearing points on the saddle. You want to make sure don't have any frays, any cuts. Just make sure that everything looks good. You don't have any, wear points or anything.
What if I do find a wear point at some point as I'm going along?
Yeah, so if you've got a major cut or something like that, it's time to replace the saddle, honestly, because this is the most important piece of the saddle is your bridge. So always inspect that and make sure it's in good shape. Now this stuff is very, very strong and very abrasion resistant. So you may see a little bit of fuzzing and whatnot, but that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that none of the major strands are busted or broken. So inspect your bridge, inspect your loops on the side of the saddle. Make sure there's no major frays or tears, anything like that. Same with the lineman's loops. And then from there, the saddle body, make sure that your seams and everything look good. There's no stitching that's popped, anything like that. Where all of these webbing pieces are sewn together. Just give it a quick rundown and make sure that it all looks good. This thing is supporting your weight in the tree, so it's very important to check it periodically to make sure it's in good shape.
And what about my lineman's rope and my tether?
Yep, same deal with those. So make sure there's not any major tears in the sheath. Now most of the strength in this rope comes from the core. So if you get some, little bit of fuzzing or whatnot, that's totally fine. But just make sure that there's not any major strands that are completely cut through. All right, same deal with the carabiners. Take a look at it, make sure there's no cracks or like deep cuts or anything like that may weaken the metal on this thing. Check that your gate closes all the way and that your lock actually works. So, you're going to get a little bit of wear on the finish on the inside bends of these corners, but that's totally normal. Just check it periodically to make sure there's no cracks or anything like that. But these things are super strong. I don't think you're going to have any trouble with them. But from there, yeah, so just make sure that the waist belt and the leg straps, the buckles work and that they actually lock when you click them in. So if you get any dirt or grime in there, you're going to want to clean that out to make sure that they work properly.
All right, we just covered the saddle. What about the sticks?
Yep, it's the same deal. So you want to inspect your Dynalite rope and make sure there's no cuts or frays in it. It's going to get a little bit fuzzy from the bark on the tree, but that's totally fine. Just make sure there's no major cuts.
And you told me a while ago, replace those every 2 years?
Right, it's recommended you replace them every 2 years, and Tether does sell replacements for super cheap. So
yeah, it looks like it's easy to replace. You take that Allen head screw out.
You don't even have to take that off. It just loops right on there.
Perfect.
So that's
easy.
Another thing to check. Take the loop off, make sure your splice looks good and it's all staying together like it should. And then make sure that it's, over the button and in this groove on the tab right there. So from there, make sure there's no loose parts, make sure your bolt's tight and you've got no play in the standoff and the step. These shouldn't rust on you, but if you leave them out in the weather and these get super rusty, I would definitely replace them. So I would not recommend leaving them out in the woods for, an extended period of time. A few days, a week is probably fine. But
we usually don't. We've got 4 sticks in a saddle and a platform, and you just go up and down every time, and you use the same setup over and over and over again. But a bunch of different ways to skin the cat.
Yeah, but from there, make sure your bolts are tight, rust-free. Make sure you're, take a look at your step and your standoff. Make sure it's not bent or anything like that. But for the most part, these are really, really solid stick, and you're not going to have any trouble out of them.
All right, last thing, we're going to look at our platform here.
Yeah, so there's not much on the platform that can really go wrong. Just same thing with the webbing. Make sure there's no frays, no tears. Check your buckle and that the the way it engages here, you got this little spring-loaded lever, I guess you could call it, but make sure that's in good working order and it's not sticking or anything like that.
Make sure it's not slipping too.
Yep, make sure it's not slipping. But yeah, just make sure your strap's in good shape, and make sure your bolt for both the standoff and the platform where the post pivots up, make sure it's nice and tight.
And you said these straps you need to replace them about every 2 years?
Yeah, so your straps and your ropes, we recommend 2 years, and then for the saddle, 5 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Take good care of your stuff and it'll last a long time.
Absolutely.
But make sure that you inspect it because you do not want to have something go wrong. Bad news in a tree.